The United Earth Fleet flagship UAS Defiance cut silently through the void of space. Its massive fusion engines were throttled back to standard patrol speed as it monitored the frontier between humanity's core worlds and the Outer Rim frontier stations. The great vessel represented the pinnacle of human engineering: 2 kilometers of reinforced hull plating, advanced sensor arrays, and enough firepower to reduce a small moon to rubble. On the bridge, Captain Jake Morrison stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the holographic display of the surrounding sector. The stars stretched out in all directions, pinpricks of light representing the countless worlds humanity had claimed in its relentless expansion from Earth. For over 3 centuries, humans had been spreading outward, establishing colonies on any habitable or terraformable world they could find. "Status report," Jake said, his voice calm and measured. Communications Officer Amy Patterson turned from her console. "All colonial outposts reporting normal operations. Captain, the mining facility on New Texas is running at 127% of projected capacity. They're requesting additional transport ships for the next ore shipment." "Good." Jake nodded. "Route the request to Fleet Command. I'm sure they'll be pleased with the extra resources." Weapons Officer Ben Adams cleared his throat. "Defensive systems at optimal readiness, sir. Though I'm not sure why we're running at battle stations in this sector. We haven't had so much as a pirate sighting in months." Jake allowed himself a small smile. "Call it a captain's intuition. Adams, the Outer Rim has been too quiet lately. I'd rather be overprepared than caught off guard." The truth was, Jake had received intelligence briefings suggesting unusual energy signatures beyond the frontier. Nothing concrete, nothing actionable, just enough to raise the hairs on the back of his neck. 20 years in the United Earth Fleet had taught him to trust those instincts. "Sir," Amy's voice cut through his thoughts, suddenly tense. "I'm picking up something. Massive. It just appeared at the edge of our sensor range." Jake turned sharply. Define appeared. "Officer Patterson." "It wasn't there. And then it was. Sir, no warp signature, no conventional propulsion trail. It's as if it materialized." "On screen," Jake ordered. The main view screen shifted, zooming in on a distant point of space. What it revealed caused the bridge to fall into stunned silence. A vessel, if it could be called that, hung against the backdrop of stars. It dwarfed the Defiance by at least 20 times, its hull a strange, iridescent material that seemed to shift and pulse with internal energy. The design was unlike anything in human records. Organic curves blended with geometric precision, creating a structure that defied conventional engineering principles. "Is it transmitting?" Jake asked, finding his voice. Amy worked her console with practiced efficiency. "Yes, sir. It's broadcasting on all frequencies. The computer is attempting to translate, but the language structure is unlike anything in our databases." "Keep at it, Adams. Bring all weapon systems to full readiness, but do not target or lock. I want defensive screens at maximum." The bridge crew moved with disciplined urgency. Jake kept his eyes fixed on the alien vessel, mentally calculating their odds if this turned hostile. The Defiance was formidable, but against something of that size. "Captain," Amy said suddenly, "I have partial translation. It's addressing all human settlements." "Let's hear it." The bridge speakers crackled to life, the translated voice strangely flat yet resonant. "Attention, human species. We are the Zeridian Empire. Your expansion has been noted and deemed unacceptable. You have entered space designated for imperial development. You will evacuate all colonies and return to your origin world within 6 of your months. Non-compliance will result in your extinction. This is our only communication." The message repeated once before going silent. Jake felt the weight of every eye on the bridge turned toward him. In that moment, he knew his response would echo across human history, if there was to be any human history after 6 months. "Officer Patterson," he said, his voice steady, "open a channel to all human colonies, settlements, and ships. Priority Alpha 1. Channel open." "Sir." Jake stood straighter, lifting his chin. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Fleet flagship Defiance. We have just received an ultimatum from an alien power calling themselves the Zeridian Empire, demanding we abandon our colonies and retreat to Earth. My response, which I am transmitting to every human in the galaxy, is simple. We will not comply. We will not surrender a single outpost, a single mining station, or a single human life to this threat. Prepare for war. Defiance out." He turned to his crew, whose expressions ranged from shock to grim determination. "Send everything we have on the Zeridian vessel to Fleet Command. Then set course for Earth at maximum speed. If we've got 6 months to prepare for an existential threat, we don't have a moment to waste." As the Defiance's engines flared to life, accelerating the ship toward the heart of human space, Jake Morrison knew he had just committed his species to the most consequential conflict in its history. What he couldn't know was that his defiance would eventually become the stuff of legend, not just among humans, but across the stars. The next 6 months saw humanity transformed. The United Earth Fleet's manufacturing centers, which had been designed to produce one capital ship every 6 months, were retooled and expanded. Working round the clock, they began producing 5 ships per month, not elegant vessels like the pre-war fleet, but functional, heavily armed warships designed for a single purpose: to fight and, if necessary, to die protecting humanity. On Mars, the great domes that housed the civilian population were reinforced with layers of energy-dispersing materials, while the spaces between them were filled with anti-ship batteries disguised as atmospheric processors. The Red Planet, once a symbol of humanity's first steps into the solar system, became a fortress. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter transformed from a mining operation into a military asset. Each significant rock was hollowed out, fitted with maneuvering thrusters and concealed weapon systems. What had been mining rigs were converted to missile batteries, their industrial drilling lasers repurposed as capital ship killers. Jupiter Station, the massive orbital habitat circling the gas giant, became the forward command center for the defense of the outer system. Its civilian sections were evacuated, and the entire structure was redesigned as a combination shipyard, repair facility, and defensive platform. Colonel Sarah Williams, a veteran of anti-piracy operations in the Outer Rim, took command, overseeing the installation of experimental shield generators and gravity manipulation fields designed to funnel attacking ships into predetermined kill zones. Even the civilian sector mobilized with frightening efficiency. Cargo haulers were fitted with armor plating and basic weapon systems, turning them into impromptu corvettes. Passenger liners were converted to troop transports or hospital ships. Mining crews became infantry, their experience with explosives and heavy equipment making them ideal for boarding actions and ship-to-ship combat. At the heart of this transformation was Captain, now Fleet Admiral, Jake Morrison. His defiant broadcast had made him the face of humanity's resistance, and Fleet Command had recognized his symbolic importance by promoting him to lead the combined human forces. "We can't match them for technology or numbers," Jake told the assembled commanders at the first War Council on Earth. "But we can make them pay for every inch of space they take. Our advantage is that we're fighting for our homes, our families, our very existence. They're fighting for expansion. That gives us the edge in will, if nothing else. Dr. Lisa Zhang, a brilliant xenotechnologist who had been studying the sensor readings from the Zeridian dreadnought, spoke up. I believe I've identified a potential vulnerability in their shield systems. The energy signature fluctuates in a predictable pattern. If we can time our weapons fire to coincide with the downward phase of that fluctuation, we might be able to penetrate their defenses. Jake leaned forward. How sure are you of this, Dr. Zhang? 70%, she said without hesitation, which is better odds than we have going head-to-head with their technology as it stands. Get whatever resources you need, Jake ordered. I want prototype weapons designed to exploit this weakness within 2 months. As the meeting concluded, Colonel Pete Davis, the grizzled commander of Earth's ground forces, approached Jake privately. You know, Admiral, there's a very real possibility we lose this war. Jake met the older man's gaze. I'm aware, Colonel, but I'd rather go down fighting than surrender everything we've built across the stars. Wouldn't you? Davis nodded slowly. Just making sure we're on the same page. For what it's worth, I think you made the right call. No species that gives up without a fight deserves to survive anyway. The first test of humanity's preparations came 3 months after the ultimatum, far earlier than expected. A Zeridian scout force appeared near the New Texas mining colony, a remote outpost in the Outer Rim. The colony, despite its distance from Earth, had received the highest priority defensive upgrades due to its strategic resources. The Zeridian force consisted of 3 mid-sized vessels, each roughly equivalent to a human cruiser. They approached with obvious confidence, no doubt expecting minimal resistance from what their intelligence would have identified as a civilian mining operation. What they found instead was a carefully orchestrated trap. The colony's administrator, a former fleet officer named Harriet Chen, had transformed the outpost into a fortress. Mining tunnels had been repurposed as missile silos, with launch tubes disguised as ventilation shafts. Sensor reflective coatings made the defensive emplacements invisible to standard scans. The Zeridians broadcast the same evacuation order they had sent 6 months earlier, apparently assuming the remote colony might not have received the message. In response, Administrator Chen transmitted a single word: defiance. The battle that followed was brief but devastating. The Zeridian ships, caught unprepared for serious resistance, were ambushed by missiles launching from hidden silos across the asteroid's surface. 2 vessels were crippled in the initial volley. The third managed to return fire, destroying several mining facilities and killing 17 colonists before a final barrage of missiles breached its engineering section, causing a catastrophic reactor failure. The victory at New Texas, small though it was in the grand scheme, sent a powerful message throughout human space. The Zeridians could be hurt. They could be beaten. The battle recordings were transmitted to every colony, every ship, every military installation. Morale soared. Admiral Morrison seized on the momentum, authorizing a series of small-scale offensive operations. Captain Danny Parker, commanding a squadron of 6 newly commissioned fast attack vessels, began conducting deep strike raids against Zeridian supply lines and forward positions. Parker's tactics were unconventional but effective. His ships would jump into a system, target Zeridian vessels with precision strikes, and jump out before reinforcements could arrive. In several instances, his squadron managed to board and capture Zeridian supply ships, providing invaluable intelligence and technology samples for Dr. Lisa Zhang's research team. "They're arrogant," Parker reported after one particularly successful raid. "They don't expect resistance, and they're slow to adapt when they encounter it. Their command structure seems rigid, Individual ship commanders wait for orders rather than showing initiative. Jake considered this information carefully. Exploit that. Hit them where they don't expect, and be gone before their chain of command can respond. As the conflict intensified, so did Dr. Zhang's research, working with the captured Zeridian technology. She confirmed her theory about their shield frequencies and developed a modulation system that could be retrofitted to existing human weapons. "It's not perfect," she explained during a briefing at Fleet Headquarters on Luna. "The window of vulnerability is milliseconds wide, and their systems adapt quickly. But if we coordinate our fire, time it precisely, we can penetrate their defenses with conventional weapons." The first full-scale implementation of Zhang's discovery came during what would later be known as the Siege of Jupiter Station. A Zeridian battle group consisting of 1 dreadnought and 12 support vessels appeared at the edge of Jupiter's orbit and immediately moved to engage the station. Colonel Sarah Williams had prepared extensively for this moment. Under her command, Jupiter Station had been transformed from a scientific and commercial hub into a death trap for unwary attackers. The station's outer rings were now lined with weapon emplacements equipped with Zhang's frequency modulators, while the surrounding space had been seeded with mines programmed to activate only when Zeridian energy signatures were detected. "Let them come," Williams told her crew as the Zeridian ships approached. "Let them think we're easy prey." The Zeridians advanced in a precise formation, maintaining strict communication protocols that human intelligence had now learned to monitor. As they came within range, Williams gave the order that transmitted Dr. Zhang's targeting calculations to every weapon on the station. "Fire," she said calmly. The coordinated barrage caught the Zeridian ships at the exact moment their shields fluctuated. Dozens of energy beams and projectiles slipped through what should have been impenetrable defenses, striking critical systems. 3 support vessels were destroyed outright, while the dreadnought suffered significant damage to its propulsion systems. Confused by this unexpected development, the Zeridian commander made a critical error. He ordered his remaining ships to close distance with the station, intending to launch boarding parties. It was exactly what Williams had anticipated. As the Zeridian vessels moved deeper into Jupiter's orbit, they triggered the hidden minefield. Explosions blossomed in the void, further damaging the already compromised ships. Still, the Zeridians pressed on, managing to dock boarding craft with the outer ring of Jupiter Station. Here, too, Williams had prepared a surprise. The corridors the Zeridians entered were not critical pathways, but carefully designed kill zones. Security bulkheads slammed shut behind the boarding parties, trapping them in compartments that could be vented to space, flooded with incapacitating gas, or turned into impromptu crematoriums with the flip of a switch. Those Zeridian troops that managed to avoid these traps found themselves engaged in close-quarters combat with station security forces who had trained specifically for this scenario. The aliens, while physically imposing and technologically advanced, had little experience with the brutality of ship-to-ship combat. They died in droves. When the battle ended, Jupiter Station remained intact, though damaged. 5 of the 13 Zeridian vessels had been destroyed, with 4 others so severely crippled they had to be abandoned. The remainder retreated, jumping to unknown coordinates. The victory at Jupiter Station provided humanity with something precious: time. The Zeridians, clearly taken aback by the effectiveness of human resistance, paused their advance to reassess their strategy. This gave Admiral Morrison and his commanders several weeks to further strengthen their defenses and refine their tactics. But Jake knew the respite would be temporary. "They'll be back," he told his war council. "And next time, they'll come in force. We've surprised them twice now, They won't underestimate us again. He was right. Exactly 5 months and 27 days after the initial ultimatum, the main Zeridian fleet arrived at the edge of Sol system. The tactical display in the Defiance's war room showed over 1,500 vessels, ranging from small corvette analogs to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in the human arsenal. At their center was a command ship that made the original vessel that had delivered the ultimatum look small by comparison. The human defenders numbered just over 150 ships, outnumbered 10 to 1. But this disparity didn't account for the extensive defensive installations throughout the system, nor for the unconventional tactics Jake had been developing. They think this is the final battle, he told his assembled officers. Let's make sure it is, just not the way they expect. The Zeridian fleet approached in a massive, organized formation, clearly designed to overwhelm any defensive position through sheer numbers. Their commander, Admiral Cathvar, transmitted a message to all human forces. Your resistance has been noted. It changes nothing. You were warned to evacuate. Your extinction is now inevitable. Jake didn't bother to respond. Instead, he gave the order that activated the most audacious defensive system humanity had ever conceived, the Sol System Defense Grid. For 6 months, every available construction resource not dedicated to shipbuilding had been secretly deployed throughout the solar system. Asteroids had been hollowed out and fitted with massive engines and weapon systems. Orbital platforms disguised as communication relays or scientific instruments had been positioned at strategic points. Even Earth's moon had been transformed, its far side now housing the largest energy weapon ever created by human hands. At Jake's command, these hidden defenses revealed themselves. Thousands of weapons platforms emerged from concealment, targeting the Zeridian fleet from all directions. The effect was immediate and devastating. Caught in a crossfire they couldn't have anticipated, the Zeridian vessels began taking heavy damage. Admiral Cathvar, however, was a capable commander. He quickly reorganized his forces, creating defensive formations that minimized exposure to the ambush. The battle devolved into a chaotic melee, with human ships darting between larger Zeridian vessels, firing precisely timed salvos before retreating. Captain Danny Parker led a squadron of fast attack craft in a series of daring raids against Zeridian communication nodes, disrupting their command and control. Colonel Williams, her Jupiter station too far from the main battle to participate directly, dispatched all available fighters to harry the Zeridian rear lines. Despite these efforts, the sheer numerical advantage of the Zeridian forces began to tell. Human defensive platforms were systematically targeted and destroyed. Ships were lost in increasing numbers. Earth's orbital defenses, while formidable, couldn't stop the inexorable advance of the alien armada. Jake, watching from the Defiance's bridge as the tactical situation deteriorated, made a decision that would alter the course of the battle and history. Set a direct course for the Zeridian command ship, he ordered. Maximum speed. His first officer, Commander Rodriguez, looked at him in shock. Sir, their point defenses will tear us apart before we get within 10,000 kilometers. Not if every other ship in the fleet is providing covering fire. Jake replied, and not if we time our approach to coincide with Dr. Zhang's calculated shield fluctuations. He opened a channel to the fleet. All vessels. This is Admiral Morrison. The Defiance will attempt a direct assault on the Zeridian command ship. I need every available craft to provide covering fire and distraction. Time your attacks according to Dr. Zhang's calculations. This is our moment. Defiance out. What followed was either the most brilliant or most desperate maneuver in naval history, depending on who told the story later. The Defiance accelerated to maximum speed, charging directly toward the heart of the Zeridian formation. Around it, every human ship that could still fight poured fire into the enemy vessels, forcing them to divide their attention. The Zeridians, recognizing the threat, concentrated their fire on the Defiance. The flagship's shields buckled under the assault. Sections of hull plating vaporized, and entire decks were exposed to vacuum. Casualties mounted by the second. On the bridge, now operating on emergency power with atmosphere venting through multiple breaches. Jake held onto his command chair as the ship shuddered around him. "Distance to target," he called out. Weapons Officer Adams, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead, checked his damaged console. 8,000 kilometers, sir. Their shields are at peak strength. Maintain course, all remaining power to engines and forward shields. The Defiance continued its suicide run, accelerating even as it disintegrated. At 5,000 kilometers. Jake gave an order that stunned the remaining bridge crew. Prepare to activate the fusion drive's emergency overload sequence. This was not a desperation tactic they had trained for. It was effectively turning the Defiance into a fusion bomb. The energy released would be enough to devastate anything within 1,000 kilometers. "Sir," Adams protested, "that's a suicide order." "I'm aware. Officer Adams." Jake replied calmly. "Begin evacuation of all non-essential personnel to escape pods, but I need a volunteer to remain at weapons to ensure the sequence initiates at precisely the right moment." Adams straightened, wiping blood from his eyes. "No need for volunteers. Sir, I'll do it." Jake nodded, unsurprised. "The rest of you, to the escape pods." "That's an order." Communications Officer Amy Patterson stood her ground. "Begging your pardon, Admiral, but someone needs to maintain communications to coordinate the timing with the rest of the fleet." "I'm staying." One by one, the bridge officers declared their intention to remain at their posts. Jake felt a surge of pride even as he recognized the finality of their decision. "Very well," he said. "Let's make it count." The Defiance closed the remaining distance under punishing fire. Its shields failed completely at 2,000 kilometers. Hull integrity dropped to critical levels at 1,000. Yet still it drove forward, engines straining beyond their design limitations. 500 kilometers, Adams reported. Their shield fluctuation cycle will reach minimum strength in 15 seconds. Jake opened a final channel to the fleet. "All vessels, fire everything you have at the command ship on my mark. Timing is everything." The seconds counted down. The Defiance, now little more than a shattered hulk driven by momentum and determination, crossed the final distance to the Zeridian command ship. "Mark!" Jake called. Across the solar system, every human vessel and weapons platform fired at precisely the same instant. The Zeridian command ship's shields, caught at their weakest point in the fluctuation cycle, buckled under the concentrated assault. In that moment of vulnerability, the Defiance struck. Its reinforced prow, designed to withstand the stresses of near-light travel, punched through the weakened shields and into the massive vessel's command section. "Now, Adams," Jake ordered. The weapons officer activated the fusion drive overload sequence. The Defiance's engines, already operating beyond safe parameters, were pushed to catastrophic failure. The resulting explosion tore through the Zeridian command ship's bridge, killing Admiral Cathvar and his entire command staff instantly. The blast continued outward, gutting the enormous vessel from within. Secondary explosions cascaded through its length as power systems failed and ammunition stores detonated. Within minutes, what had been the pride of the Zeridian fleet was reduced to expanding debris. The psychological impact on the Zeridian forces was immediate and profound, with their command structure destroyed and communications in disarray. The cohesion of their fleet dissolved. Individual ship commanders suddenly forced to make decisions without clear orders, responded inconsistently. Some pressed the attack with redoubled fury, others fell back to defensive positions. A few even attempted to retreat from the system entirely. This confusion gave the human forces, though badly depleted, an opening. Captain Parker, now the senior officer with the Defiance destroyed, rallied the remaining ships for a counterattack. Colonel Williams deployed Jupiter Station's reserves, which had been held back for this moment. Even the civilian ships that had been converted for war joined the assault. The battle raged for another 6 hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Without centralized command, the Zeridian numerical advantage became almost meaningless. Their ships, individually powerful, were picked off one by coordinated human attacks, exploiting Dr. Zhang's shield frequency discovery. Finally, the acting Zeridian commander, a sub-admiral who had been commanding the fleet's rear echelon, transmitted a request for ceasefire. Captain Parker, after consulting with Earth's political leadership, accepted. The terms were negotiated over the following weeks. The Zeridian Empire, shocked by its first significant military defeat in centuries, agreed to recognize human sovereignty over all existing colonies and a substantial buffer zone beyond. Trade agreements were established, and a non-aggression pact was signed. The human negotiating team, led by the United Earth President and including Dr. Lisa Zhang, traveled to the Zeridian capital world for the formal treaty ceremony. There, they were received by the Zeridian Emperor himself, a rare honor that signified the newfound respect the Empire held for humanity. "You are the first species in 1,000 years to resist our expansion," the Emperor said during the ceremony. "The first to prefer extinction to submission. We did not understand such thinking, but we understand it now. Your Admiral Morrison's actions have become a subject of study in our military academies." The human delegates exchanged glances at this unexpected revelation. "Your species lacks our technology and resources," the Emperor continued. "But you possess something we had forgotten the value of, the will to risk everything in defense of your principles. This is worthy of respect." The treaty, formally titled the Sole Zeridian Accord, marked humanity's entrance onto the galactic stage not as conquered subjects, but as equals. The cost had been staggering. Nearly 30% of human military personnel had perished, and several colonies had been destroyed, but extinction had been averted. In the years that followed, humanity rebuilt and expanded. The technologies recovered from Zeridian vessels accelerated human development by centuries. Dr. Zhang's research team, using the principles discovered during the war, developed new propulsion and defensive systems that made human ships competitive with those of the older spacefaring races. The legend of the Defiance and its final charge spread throughout the galaxy, on 100 worlds. The story was told, sometimes as a warning against underestimating seemingly primitive species, sometimes as inspiration for those facing overwhelming odds. Military academies across known space added the Battle of Saul to their curriculum, analyzing Jake Morrison's tactics and the human doctrine that had emerged during the conflict: never run, always fight. The phrase became a shorthand for humanity's approach to adversity, whether martial, technological, or diplomatic. Perhaps the most telling indicator of the war's impact came 5 years after its conclusion, when the Zeridian Empire found itself threatened by a previously unknown hostile species from beyond its borders. The Emperor's request for assistance was sent not to the Empire's traditional allies, but to Earth. The human response, transmitted on all frequencies, just as Jake's defiant message had been years earlier, was simple: "We are coming." When the combined human-Zeridian fleet drove back the invaders, saving the Empire's outer colonies from destruction, the alliance that had begun in the aftermath of conflict was cemented in shared victory. Former enemies became the closest of allies, their strengths complementing each other's weaknesses, and on 1,000 worlds, in 100 languages, the story was told of how humanity, outnumbered, outgunned, and facing extinction, had stood its ground and changed the course of galactic history with a single word: defiance. In the Memorial Hall on Earth, a statue of Admiral Jake Morrison stands beside those of Dr. Lisa Jang, Captain Danny Parker, Colonel Sarah Williams, and all the others who led humanity through its darkest hour. The plaque beneath Morrison's likeness bears the words he spoke when the original Zeridian ultimatum was received, words that would echo across human space and beyond for generations to come. We will not comply. We will not surrender a single outpost, a single mining station, or a single human life. We choose defiance. Visitors to the memorial often note that the statue's eyes seem to look not at them, but beyond, to the stars where humanity's future unfolds. Secure in the knowledge that no force in the galaxy can extinguish the human spirit when it chooses to stand and fight. In military academies throughout human space, cadets study the tactics of the First Zeridian War, learning the principles that allowed an outmatched species to prevail: innovation over tradition, flexibility over rigid doctrine, and above all, the power of absolute resolve in the face of overwhelming odds. On the anniversary of the final battle, lights bloom across human worlds, not in celebration of victory or in mourning for the lost, but as a reminder of the price of freedom and the responsibility that comes with it. The lights are visible from orbit, a message to any watching from the darkness between the stars. We are humanity. We stand our ground. We choose defiance.